The worst mistake of my life started with a wedding invitation and a lie I hadn't told yet. The rain had turned downtown Seattle into a blur of silver lights and reflections, each passing car smearing across the wet pavement like a watercolor painting. I stood beneath the awning of the Grand Harbor Hotel, clutching an ivory envelope that had already softened from the moisture in my hands. My ex-fiancé was getting engaged tonight. Not next month. Not next year. Tonight. 3 years together. 8 months planning a future. And somehow, only 4 months after ending things with me, he had found someone else to place a ring on. I wish I could say I was there to prove I'd moved on. I wasn't. I was there because some stubborn, embarrassing part of me needed to see it with my own eyes. Needed confirmation that the chapter was truly over. A gust of wind pushed rain across the sidewalk and onto my navy dress. I shivered. Maybe coming here was a mistake. Maybe I should turn around, call a rideshare, go home and spend the evening with takeout and bad reality TV. But my feet refused to move. Through the glass entrance I could already see guests arriving. Women in elegant gowns. Men in tailored suits. Laughter. Champagne. Happiness. Everything I had imagined for myself once. My phone buzzed. My best friend Ava. I didn't answer. Because I already knew what she would say. Don't go inside. Don't do this to yourself. But she wasn't standing where I was. She wasn't watching the future she had dreamed about belonged to someone else. I slipped my phone back into my purse and took a slow breath. The hotel lobby glowed with warm golden light. A pianist played somewhere inside. Every note seemed designed to remind me exactly how alone I felt. Then I noticed him. Seated by himself in the far corner of the lounge beyond the glass walls. A man dressed entirely in black. Black suit. Black tie. Black watch. He wasn't drinking. Wasn't scrolling through his phone. Wasn't talking to anyone. He simply sat there, calm and still, while people unconsciously gave his table a wide berth. Something about him changed the atmosphere around him. Not fear exactly. Respect. The kind that couldn't be bought. The kind that followed power. I should have looked away. Instead I found myself staring. And for reasons I still don't fully understand, a reckless thought entered my mind. A thought so ridiculous that I almost laughed out loud. What if a complete stranger walked into that engagement party with me? What if, for one night, I didn't have to be the woman who got left behind? I stared at him for at least 10 seconds before common sense finally returned. This was insane. Completely insane. Normal people did not walk up to strangers and ask them to impersonate their partner at an engagement party. Especially not strangers who looked like they belonged on the cover of a luxury magazine, and somehow made an entire hotel lounge feel smaller just by sitting in it. I laughed nervously at myself and turned toward the entrance. I had taken exactly 3 steps when I heard applause from inside the ballroom. The engagement celebration had officially begun. My chest tightened. Through the glass doors I caught a glimpse of Ethan. He stood beneath a crystal chandelier, smiling beside a beautiful blonde woman in a white dress. People gathered around them holding champagne glasses. Cameras flashed. Everyone looked happy. Everyone except me. Suddenly breathing felt harder than it should have. I stepped backward without realizing it, and nearly bumped into a server carrying a tray of sparkling water. "Sorry," I whispered. The embarrassment burned hotter than the disappointment. This was not who I wanted to be. I did not want to be the woman standing outside her ex's engagement party looking like she had lost everything. Before I could stop myself, I turned around and walked toward the lounge. The closer I got to the stranger's table, the more ridiculous my plan sounded. Yet somehow my feet kept moving. He noticed me long before I reached him. I could tell by the way his eyes lifted from the city skyline beyond the windows and settled on me. Calm. Observant. Unreadable. Up close he looked even more intimidating. Maybe 6'3". Dark hair perfectly styled. Sharp features. A black suit tailored so precisely it looked custom-made. But it was his eyes that caught me off guard. They were not cold. They were simply focused, as though he never wasted attention on anything unimportant. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice was deep and smooth, carrying the faintest trace of an accent I could not place. I almost turned around right then. Almost. Instead, I pulled out the empty chair across from him. "This is going to sound completely crazy," I said. One corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Not quite a smile. More like curiosity. Go on. My pulse hammered in my ears. There is an engagement party upstairs. He nodded once. I noticed. The groom is my ex. The words tasted awful. Saying them aloud made everything feel more real. His expression did not change. And I swallowed hard. And I was wondering if you would pretend to be my boyfriend for about 30 minutes. Silence. Absolute silence. Somewhere behind me, a piano continued playing softly. Rain tapped against the windows. My face burned. Every second felt like an hour. Then he leaned back slightly in his chair and studied me. Not in a judgmental way. Not amused. Just thoughtful. As if he were evaluating a business proposal instead of one of the most humiliating requests ever made. Finally he spoke. You do not know my name. No. And yet you trust me enough to ask that? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because honestly I did not know the answer. His gaze lingered on me for another moment before he glanced toward the ballroom upstairs. Then back at me. And for the first time I saw something unexpected in his eyes. Interest. For a moment neither of us spoke. The rain continued sliding down the windows behind him, turning the Seattle skyline into streaks of silver and gold. I suddenly became aware of how absurd this entire situation was. I was sitting across from a stranger, asking him to participate in the most desperate decision I had ever made. You can say no, I said quickly. Honestly, you probably should. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement maybe. You seem determined to reject your own proposal. I let out a nervous laugh. That is because I finally heard it out loud. He glanced down at the watch on his wrist before looking back at me. How long have you been together? The question caught me off guard. 3 years. And how long has he been engaged? I hesitated. About 6 weeks. His expression remained perfectly calm, but somehow that made the answer feel worse. 6 weeks. 3 years replaced in 6 weeks. The thought still hurt more than I wanted to admit. I see, he said quietly. I looked away toward the ballroom entrance. Guests continued arriving. Every passing second brought me closer to the moment I would have to either walk inside alone or admit defeat and leave. Neither option sounded appealing. This was a mistake, I said, pushing my chair back slightly. I am sorry for bothering you. Maya. I froze. My heart skipped. Slowly I looked back at him. How do you know my name? For the first time all evening he smiled. It was subtle, brief, dangerous only because it made him somehow more impossible to ignore. He gestured toward the event program sticking halfway out of my purse. My name was printed across the cover. Wedding planner assistant. Maya Johnson. Heat rushed into my face. Right. You are observant, he said. Apparently not enough. The smile lingered for another second before disappearing. Then his expression became thoughtful again. Tell me something. What? If I agree, what exactly are you hoping to accomplish? The honest answer slipped out before I could stop it. I want one night where I do not feel like the person who got left behind. The words hung between us. Raw. Embarrassing. True. He studied me carefully. Not with pity. Not with judgment. Just attention. More attention than anyone had given me in months. Finally he stood. The movement was smooth and effortless. Suddenly everyone in the lounge seemed to notice him. A manager near the bar straightened immediately. 2 men in dark suits near the entrance exchanged quick glances. It was subtle but impossible to miss. People knew who he was. Important people. My pulse quickened. What are you doing? I asked. He buttoned his jacket. Accepting your offer. I blinked. You are serious? Completely. Relief hit me so fast I almost laughed. Thank you. He tilted his head slightly. Do not thank me yet. Something in his tone made my smile fade. Why? He extended his hand toward me. Because if I am going to play the role properly, there will be one condition. I stared at his hand, then at him. And suddenly I had the unmistakable feeling that agreeing to this arrangement might change far more than tonight. I looked at his outstretched hand but did not take it. Not yet. Something told me this was the moment where common sense should finally return and drag me out of the hotel before I made an even bigger mistake. What condition? I asked. The piano music drifted softly through the lounge. Rain tapped against the glass. For a second he simply watched me. Someday, he said calmly, when I ask you a question you will answer honestly. I blinked. That is it. That is it. I stared at him waiting for the catch. There had to be one. Nobody looked like him, carried himself like him, and agreed to help strangers for nothing. Yet his expression never changed. You are serious? I asked. Very. Relief mixed with confusion. Of all the conditions I had imagined, that had not been one of them. Fine, I said. I can do that. His hand remained extended. This time I placed mine in his. His grip was warm, steady, confident. Not possessive. Not controlling. Just certain. The moment our hands met, something strange happened. The nervous panic that had followed me all evening eased slightly. Not disappeared. Just softened. Good, he said. Then he released my hand and reached into his jacket pocket. A moment later he handed me a simple black business card. No logo. No title. Just a name. Kenji Takahashi. I read it twice. That is all it says. The people who need more information already have it. The answer should have sounded arrogant. Somehow it did not. Before I could ask another question, one of the men I had noticed near the entrance approached our table. Dark suit. Professional posture. Respectful expression. Sir, he said quietly, everything is prepared. Sir. Not Mr. Not Mr. Takahashi. Just sir. Kenji gave a small nod. The man immediately stepped back. My stomach tightened. Whoever Kenji was, he was clearly important. More important than I had realized. Should I be worried? I asked. A faint smile appeared again. About tonight? About you. He laughed softly. The sound surprised me. It was the first genuinely human thing I had seen from him all evening. No, Maya. You should not be worried about me. For some reason that answer worried me even more. He checked his watch once more before offering his arm. We should go. If we arrive too late, the dramatic effect is lost. I could not help laughing. You have done this before? No. Then how do you know? Because your ex spent 6 weeks planning this evening. His eyes met mine. I imagine he would hate being upstaged. I nearly choked on my own laughter. For the first time since receiving that invitation, the ache in my chest loosened. Just a little. Together we walked toward the ballroom entrance. The golden lights reflected across the marble floors. Guests moved through the hall carrying champagne glasses and smiling for photographs. My heartbeat grew louder with every step. This was really happening. I was about to walk into my ex's engagement party on the arm of a man I had met less than 20 minutes ago. Then the ballroom doors opened. Several guests immediately turned toward us. And judging by the sudden change in their expressions, they recognized Kenji long before they noticed me. The conversation inside the ballroom did not stop when we entered. It simply changed. The shift was subtle at first. Pause here. A glance there. A businessman in an expensive suit suddenly straightening his posture. A woman lowering her champagne glass midway to her lips. It spread through the room like a ripple across still water. People recognized Kenji. Not everyone, but enough. And the ones who did immediately treated him differently. I felt it in the way they looked at him, the way they stepped aside without being asked, the way they watched him while pretending not to. You were not kidding, I whispered. About what? People know who you are. Some do. That was all he said. As if the reaction of an entire ballroom was completely normal. We moved deeper into the event. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across polished marble floors. A string quartet played near the stage. Servers floated through the crowd carrying trays of champagne and appetizers. Everything looked elegant, perfect, which only made my nervousness worse. Then I saw Ethan. He stood near the center of the room beside his fiancée, Lauren. His arm rested comfortably around her waist while guests gathered around them offering congratulations. The sight still hurt. Not as much as before, but enough. My steps slowed. Kenji noticed immediately. Do you want to leave? he asked quietly. I looked at him in surprise. What? We can leave. The offer caught me completely off guard. No pressure. No judgment. No expectation. Just a simple option. For a second I almost accepted. Then I looked back at Ethan. 3 years. 3 birthdays. 3 Christmas mornings. 3 years of plans and promises. No. I had come this far. No, I said. I am staying. Something approving flashed across Kenji's face. Good. Before I could ask what that meant, Ethan finally noticed me. His smile vanished instantly. It was almost comical. 1 second he was laughing with a group of guests. The next he looked as though someone had pulled the floor out from under him. His eyes moved from me to Kenji, then back to me. Confusion, shock, disbelief. Every emotion arrived at once. Lauren followed his gaze. Her polite smile faltered. Maya, Ethan said as we approached. Hearing my name from him felt strange now. Distant. Like a song I used to know. Hi, Ethan. His attention immediately shifted to Kenji. I did not know you were bringing someone. I almost laughed. Bringing someone. As though this were some casual surprise. Before I could answer, Kenji extended his hand. Calm. Confident. Completely at ease. Kenji Takahashi. Ethan shook it automatically. The moment he heard the name, something changed. I saw recognition flash across his face. Not complete recognition, but enough. Enough to make him suddenly very careful. And that was the moment I realized my fake date might be far more powerful than I had ever imagined. The atmosphere shifted after that handshake. Ethan recovered quickly, at least on the surface. He forced a smile and introduced Lauren, who greeted us with practiced politeness. But I could see the questions in both their eyes. More importantly, I could see the questions forming in everyone else's. How had Maya Johnson arrived with Kenji Takahashi? I wished I knew the answer myself. It is nice to finally meet you, Lauren said. Her smile was warm, but her attention kept drifting toward Kenji. Not in admiration. In curiosity. The same curiosity spreading throughout the ballroom. Congratulations, Kenji said calmly. Thank you. Ethan cleared his throat. Maya never mentioned she was seeing someone. Neither had I. Considering I had met him less than an hour ago, I opened my mouth, searching for something believable. Before I could answer, Kenji spoke. We both prefer privacy. The response was smooth. Effortless. Nobody questioned it. In fact, Ethan seemed even more uncomfortable afterward. As guests continued approaching the couple with congratulations, several stopped to greet Kenji first. That was when things became truly strange. A real estate developer whose name I recognized from local news walked directly past Ethan to shake Kenji's hand. Moments later, a city council member did the same. Then the owner of a major shipping company. Each interaction followed the same pattern. Respect. Familiarity. Deference. Nobody ignored the engaged couple completely, but somehow Kenji's presence kept pulling attention away from them. Who exactly are you? I whispered once we stepped aside. His expression remained neutral. A businessman. That answer sounds rehearsed. Because I have been asked the question before. I folded my arms. A lot. More than a lot. Before I could push further, another guest approached. An older gentleman in an expensive navy suit. The moment he saw Kenji, his face brightened. Mr. Takahashi. I did not know you would be attending. There it was again. The respect. The careful choice of words. Kenji exchanged a few polite sentences about international investments and shipping routes. I understood almost none of it. What I did understand was the older man's reaction when he finally noticed me standing beside him. Surprise. Genuine surprise. You must be very special, he said to me with a smile. Mr. Takahashi rarely attends social events. Before I could respond, the man was pulled away by another conversation. My eyes immediately found Kenji. Rarely attends social events? He adjusted his cufflink. I dislike them. Then why are you here? For the first time all evening, his answer came without hesitation. Because you asked. My heartbeat stumbled. It was such a simple response. Yet somehow it landed harder than anything else he had said. Across the room, Ethan was watching us again. Not casually, not accidentally, watching. And when our eyes briefly met, I realized something surprising. For the first time since our relationship ended, he looked uncertain. Then Kenji leaned slightly closer and spoke quietly enough that only I could hear. Your ex is not the only person trying to figure out how we know each other. I frowned. What do you mean? His gaze moved toward the ballroom entrance. Several men in dark suits had just arrived. The moment they entered, they immediately began searching the room. And when they spotted Kenji, every one of them headed in our direction. The men crossed the ballroom with the kind of confidence that made people step aside without realizing they were doing it. They were dressed like executives, not security. Tailored suits, polished shoes, calm expressions. Yet every person they passed seemed instinctively aware that they were important. The first man stopped beside Kenji and inclined his head slightly. Sir, we have been looking for you. Sir again. Not Mr. Not Mr. Takahashi. Just sir. Kenji nodded once. Everything all right? Yes, sir. The exchange lasted only seconds, but it raised 100 new questions. The men acknowledged me politely before moving away toward another section of the ballroom. I watched them disappear into the crowd. You have an entire team following you around. Kenji glanced toward the stage where the engagement celebration continued. Not following. Working. That did not answer my question. A faint smile touched his lips. I noticed. Before I could continue interrogating him, applause erupted near the front of the room. Ethan and Lauren had stepped onto the stage to thank everyone for attending. Guests gradually turned their attention forward. Glasses were raised. Cameras appeared. The spotlight settled on the happy couple. I expected the familiar ache to return. Surprisingly, it did not. Instead, I found myself studying the room. Studying the people who kept glancing toward Kenji. It was impossible not to notice. Even while Ethan spoke, several guests seemed more interested in where Kenji was standing. One conversation I overheard made my curiosity even worse. I thought he was in Tokyo this week. Apparently plans changed. Do you know who she is? No idea. They were talking about me. Or rather, about why I was standing beside him. The realization felt surreal. 2 hours earlier I had been standing alone outside in the rain questioning every decision I had ever made. Now complete strangers were wondering who I was because of the man next to me. The speech ended. More applause followed. Music resumed. Guests drifted back into conversations. Ethan stepped off the stage and almost immediately headed in our direction. Lauren remained behind speaking with relatives. Can we talk? He asked me. Kenji looked at me rather than answering for me. The choice was clearly mine. I appreciated that more than he probably realized. Sure, I said. Ethan nodded toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. I followed him a few steps away. Not far. Just enough for privacy. The moment we stopped, he glanced back toward Kenji. Who is that guy? I laughed despite myself. Not hello. Not how have you been. Straight to the point. His name is Kenji. I got that part. His expression tightened. Maya, everybody here knows who he is. My heartbeat quickened. Everybody. Ethan lowered his voice. You seriously do not know? Before I could answer, someone called Ethan's name from across the room. He looked frustrated. Distracted. Whatever he had been about to tell me would have to wait. But as he walked away, he left me with one sentence that refused to leave my mind. Just be careful, he said quietly. People like him do not enter a room without changing it. The rest of the evening should have felt like a victory. I had survived the engagement party. I was no longer standing alone. Ethan looked confused, curious, maybe even slightly unsettled. Yet the closer the night moved toward its end, the more questions I had about the man beside me. Guests continued approaching him. Some wanted conversations. Others simply wanted a handshake. Every interaction followed the same pattern. Respect. Careful words. Genuine attention. Nobody treated Kenji like an ordinary businessman. When the event finally began winding down, people slowly filtered toward the exits. The orchestra packed away their instruments. Servers cleared empty glasses. The ballroom lights softened. I found myself standing near one of the tall windows overlooking the city. Rain still shimmered across the streets below. You never answered my question, I said. Kenji joined me by the window. Which one? What exactly do you do? His reflection appeared in the glass beside mine. Calm as always. International logistics. I laughed. That sounds suspiciously vague. Because it is. At least he was honest. Before I could press further, my phone vibrated. A message from Ava. Are you alive? I smiled despite myself. Then another message arrived. Wait. Someone just sent me a photo. Why are you standing next to Kenji Takahashi? My smile disappeared. Slowly I looked up. Kenji noticed immediately. Something wrong. I showed him the screen. For the first time all evening, he looked mildly surprised. Your friend knows who I am? Apparently. A third message appeared. Maya, call me right now. I stared at the phone. My pulse quickened. Whatever Ava knew, it was enough to make her panic. Across the ballroom, several of Kenji's associates were already preparing to leave. One of them approached quietly. The car is ready, sir. Sir. Again. The word echoed in my head. Kenji nodded. The associate stepped away. I turned back toward him. You know, this is usually the part where people tell me the truth. His gaze held mine for several seconds, long enough to make the noise of the ballroom fade into the background. And if I do? He asked. Then maybe I stop feeling like the only person in this conversation who has no idea what is happening. A faint smile appeared. Not amused. Not mocking. Almost thoughtful. Fair enough. He glanced toward the exit before returning his attention to me. The truth is complicated. Try me. Another pause. Then he reached into his jacket and removed a folded newspaper clipping. The paper looked old. Years old. He handed it to me. Confused, I unfolded it. The article was faded, but one photograph remained visible. A younger version of me. Standing at a community charity event nearly 4 years ago. My breath caught. I looked up so quickly that the paper nearly slipped from my hands. Why do you have this? For the first time all night, Kenji's calm expression changed. Not much. Just enough for me to notice. Because, he said quietly, our meeting tonight was not the first time I have seen you. For a second I could not breathe. The faded newspaper clipping trembled in my hands as I stared at the younger version of myself smiling beside a group of volunteers. I remembered that day. A community fundraiser. Free meals. School supply donations. Nothing remarkable. Nothing important. At least that was what I had always thought. You were there. I asked quietly. Kenji nodded once. The ballroom around us seemed to disappear. The music. The conversations. The laughter. None of it felt real anymore. Why would you keep this? His gaze dropped briefly to the article before returning to me. Because it reminded me of something. Of what? A faint smile appeared. Softer than any I had seen from him all night. That not everyone helps people because they want something in return. I blinked. You remembered me because I volunteered at a fundraiser? You stayed 3 hours after everyone else left. My confusion deepened. How do you know that? Because I watched you. The answer should have made me uncomfortable. Strangely, it did not. Maybe because there was no possessiveness in his voice. No hidden agenda. Just honesty. Calm and direct. I do not understand, I admitted. Neither did I at the time. He glanced toward the rain-soaked city beyond the windows. Most people wanted photographs, recognition, publicity. You stayed because an elderly woman needed help carrying supplies to her car. The memory returned instantly. I had completely forgotten about it. To me it had been a small moment, 5 minutes at most. Yet somehow he remembered it 4 years later. That is why you agreed tonight? I asked. Partly. The answer sent my heart racing again. Not because it was romantic. It was something stranger. More meaningful. He had noticed me long before I ever knew he existed. My phone vibrated once more. Ava. Probably panicking by now. I ignored it. There were more important questions. Then what was the condition really about? Kenji studied me for a moment. The honest answer? Always. He nodded slowly. I wanted a reason to speak to you. The words settled between us. Simple. Uncomplicated. Impossible to misunderstand. Somewhere across the ballroom, guests began leaving in larger groups. Chairs scraped softly across marble floors. The evening was ending. The arrangement was supposed to end with it. Yet neither of us moved toward the exit. So what happens now? I asked. For the first time all night, Kenji looked almost uncertain. Not nervous. Not uncomfortable. Just thoughtful. As though the answer mattered more than he expected. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the black business card again. This time he turned it over and wrote something on the back. A private number. He handed it to me. Now, he said quietly, you decide whether tonight was the end of a coincidence or the beginning of something neither of us expected. I looked down at the number. Then back at him. Outside, the rain continued falling across Seattle. Inside, my ex's engagement party was finally over. But somehow, standing beside Kenji Takahashi, it felt as though my real story had only just begun.